recording now, and let me pray for us, and then what I would like to hear from you, I'd like to hear how you're doing, but then I would like to hear from you, how would you like us to prioritize our time tonight? What's most important for us to spend time talking about to help you? Okay, so let's pray. Father, thank you for this time that you've carved out for us to be together, and thank you for being right here with us. It is just, it's such peace to know that you're never away from us, and that as we walk into this field where you've called us, that you're not only going to prepare us for it, but you're going to accompany us in it, and you're going to go before us. So I continue to ask your protection over all of these men and women as they equip themselves to do the work that you're calling them to. Everybody here has had stuff going on in their lives. We've lost loved ones. We've had family members who have been seriously ill. And we're all still dealing with the day-to-day struggle of the uncertainty of our world. So thank you for being our peace. Thank you for being our rock. And thank you that you have provided us with community where we can whine and cry and scream sometimes. We love you, Father, and we thank you for the love that you give to us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So tell me what questions are most important for you, or what concerns you have that are most important for you for us to deal with tonight. Our scheduled topic, I'm caught up on my earphones. Our scheduled topic is assessment and goal setting, those are important topics, but I also think that those are topics that pretty much you get a grounding for in the reading material, and you will get more of that as you go along. So while I'm prepared tonight to talk about that, I really would like to focus the time that we have on what do you guys need? What's most important for you? And before I start thinking, Wendy, you sent me an email about some broken links, and I'm sorry, but I can't find the sources of the links.
Yeah, so they actually are in the affect de-escalation paper, and under G11, he says, Dan Siegel shows how powerful relationships will be. Here's the Google link, and there's nothing there. Okay. And then on page 8, it's the same thing where he says, watch this video by Dan Siegel. Here's the Google link, and there's no link.
Okay.
I just didn't know if you had them.
If I don't have them, I'll get them.
Okay. And then I have one more question that probably all of us are going to have on this irrational beliefs observation form for week 5. Mm-hmm. At the top, it says identify the time when the 10-minute transcribe segment begins, but right underneath that, it says select a 5-minute segment. So is it 5 or is it 10?
5.
Good. All right.
And I will see if I can. I don't know if I can make changes to that observation form or not, because those were posted for us in our shells. Sure. If I can make a change to that, I'll go in and change it.
Okay. And I know that we can change it too, as long as you're telling us we can change it once we download the form.
Oh, yes, yes, you may. Yes, you may.
And then one thing that you're asking us about, as I was reading here, this is my last one. Okay. And that was, as I was reading through the relaxation piece, I don't know if I know how to tighten all and release all those different areas. Some of them I do, it makes sense, but some of them I'm like, how do you do that? So that was just my only piece. So.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you that just kind of takes practice, but it really does help if you have somebody who can guide you through it the first couple of times, so that you're not trying to pay attention to, I'm sorry, but I'm getting distracted. I'm looking in the de-escalation paper. Can you tell me again where it is, please?
Sure. On page 6, G Roman numeral 11.
6. Ha! Well, isn't that interesting? Here's the Google link and there's nothing there.
Yeah, and that's the same page on page 8 under A Roman numeral 1.
Okay.
Or little 1 or I or whatever that is.
Right. Okay. Right offhand, I don't know which Siegel videos those are, but I will go back and I will find them.
Okay.
And if they're still available, that's the thing sometimes too, is that a link has been pulled, and if they're not available, I'll see if I can find a substitute for you.
Great.
Okay. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, let's go back. Come back here. There we go. Bring you guys back to full screen. Okay, I made notes about both of those things, and I'll check them and see. With the you are correct that you can change those observation forms if you do the enable editing on them. What I may be able to edit it. Well, I can edit it. What I don't know is if I can upload it into the shell in a way that you guys can get to it. So if I can, I will. If not, then feel free to edit it yourself when you get in there. Because you won't be able to save it back to the shell either. You can save it to your assignment, but you won't be able to save it back to the shell. It'll go back to the former form when you put it in the shell. All right, I think that's kind of the housekeeping stuff tonight. So tell me what is going to be most helpful for you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Debbie. And then Natalie. Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
I would be interested in talking some more about challenging skills.
Okay.
And confrontation, as well as a good way to wrap up your session so it's not so blunt and cut off.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. Natalie.
I think mine goes along with Debbie's, kind of just help with that. And then curious, 2 weeks ago, what we missed in the virtual class or for instruction for that session.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The week 3.
Yes.
And I will tell you, Natalie, that most of what I do on week 3 is we do role plays.
Okay.
So that's a lot of what you missed, and we can pick some of those up tonight if it will be helpful for you. But week 3 in virtual session is mostly role plays of those skills in week 3,
Okay.
because you're adding a number of skills.
Yes.
In week 3. Now, having said that, I want to compliment you guys on the way you've been handling the skills, because you've been doing really well with them, and many of you we're doing paraphrasing, we're doing advanced empathetic reflecting before we got to them in the list of skills. You're just kind of doing it naturally, and that's a good thing to see. You're watching questions And it's not that questions are bad. It's that if we can phrase something in a way that it's not a question, it usually provides more of, creates more space for clients to explore things. Um, uh, the other thing that we watch for, and several of you have mentioned this in your feedback, is how much you talk. Learning to be brief in our responses is a skill that we keep practicing. And so, so sometimes even reflecting back a word or a couple of words of um, you're scared, um, you're angry, and then just leave it there. Don't explain to the client why they're angry or why they might be angry. Just make that statement or that reflection back to them, and then leave it there and see where they go with it. And sometimes they'll look at you like, "What you going to say to me next?" I had a new client call today, and she said, "You are the third counselor I've talked to today." And she said, "I just want you to know that I don't want any of this hand holding stuff. I want somebody who's going to be open and honest with me and help me solve this problem." So my response back to her was, "Well, you're going to get some of the hand holding stuff. That's gonna be there, but we can move toward working on what you want to resolve." But I said, you're going to get some empathy. And but it was funny that, she's saying, "I've talked to 2 counselors already, and they're just, I don't want them sitting with their hands folded, asking me how I feel." So, which is kind of good to know, heads up. So we'll see what happens with that one. But
Professor Adams, I had a couple things to add to the
go
list
ahead, Jackie. Yeah.
One was in chapter 9, it talks through this replan in terms of how you sort of plan your sessions and execute them. And I got the sense from reading it that it is, it's this author's unique approach.
Yes.
And so I would love to hear if you have a compare and contrast to that in terms of what you do in your own practice.
Okay.
Relative to how the author's talking through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had one question about when we're role playing or when you're actually counseling, as long as the client is not tangential and they're talking, is there any time where you feel like they're talking too much? Is that a thing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yes.
As long as it's on point, and it may be repetitive, but it's still on point and it's still, in line with what you're trying to understand from them. Is there any point where that's?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes, there is. Part of that is getting acquainted with your client, because there are some people who talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but they're never really hearing what they're saying. Whether you're hearing it or not, they're not hearing themselves. And so they may feel a need to say the same things over and over and over and over again. And also, and we're always a little bit scared of this, especially at first, of interrupting a client or talking over them. But it is appropriate if a client is kind of spooling, it's verbal diarrhea.
Yeah.
It's appropriate to say, "Wait, hey, can we take just a minute here and let me be sure that I'm catching all that's important to you," and then not to mirror it back or to reflect it back word for word, but and a couple of you have done this and done it really well, but reflecting back to them in just a couple of succinct sentences what you are hearing that seems to be most important of what they're saying. You know, so that's a good place to reflect back a feeling, to say something like, well, it really sounds like this has been pretty overwhelming for you, or it really sounds like this has been pretty devastating for you, and just kind of break into that um, that snowball of thought. And as you work with clients, you'll learn more about which of them do that and which don't. So at least initially err on the side of letting, err on the side of letting the client talk more. Let them tell their
Right.
story. And that's okay. These role plays are kind of artificial in that way, because we're asking
Yeah.
you to move very quickly into demonstrating a skill that where if you were meeting initially with the client, you would be letting them tell their story. You'd be doing a lot more of the minimal encouragers, the door openers, that kind of thing. And that might,
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is the first couple of sessions in the real world, the first
Mhm.
couple of sessions, you would expect or desire for the client to be talking, so that as you're learning their story,
exactly.
with the expectation that you would try not to necessarily minimize the amount of talking that they're doing,
Right.
as long as it's on point and it's
Hmm. Yeah.
okay.
Now you do want to begin to start to reflect back some feeling,
Sure,
so that gets introduced
sure.
into the session.
I was just
Uh,
thinking about the first session, and they could do a lot of talking, and you could be encouraging them to do that as you would want to, and you could be reflecting feelings and even meaning. But I was wondering if they ever walk away that first session thinking, well, you didn't give me a skill, or you didn't help me solve at least what they thought was the
mhm.
problem they walked in
Yeah.
with, or what have you. So that's kind
Yeah.
of was the genesis of my question.
Hmm. And it's another good one, and it kind of ties in with what Debbie was asking about. How do you end a session? At the end of your session, you want to do something that kind of brings together what you and the client have talked about. That could be in the form of, I'm wondering if there's something that you'll take away from today that might be helpful for you, or, what was the most important thing for you that we talked about today? um, and you know be open with your clients. I talk to my clients about when when we'll use homework and when we won't. For those first few sessions, unless there's just something that I really can see immediately that would be helpful for them to do in terms of homework, I'm probably not going to. And we talk about this, at least with my clients, we talk about this in their intake session, is that I'm not necessarily going to be giving them assignments, especially early on, because my goal in those early sessions is to hear their story, to hear their narrative, because I don't know enough about them in that first session. To me, it just seems presumptuous in that first session to give a lot of, well, let's read this book, or let's do this, or let's do that, or let's do the other. Mostly I'm thanking them for sharing their story with me and telling them that I want to hear more of their story, because, face it, 45 to 50 minutes in a session, initially, nobody's going to get their whole story out in a first session. And that's part of building the counseling relationship. But then
That
you
was
do
very
want to do,
helpful. Thank you.
okay, but then you do want to do something at the end to kind of tie things together for them. And that might be, you've talked about this, and this today. Is there one of these that, which one of these do you think you might want us to start with next time? And when they give you one, then be sure that you review before that next session, and you start with what they, last time you mentioned that you'd like to start with us talking a little bit more about your mom, about your relationship with your mom. I'm wondering if that's where we still want to start today, or is there some other place that you would like for us to focus today? Is there something else you'd like for us to focus on? So, and all of that is building that continuity of relationship, and it's building trust, because if you listen to me and you give me some reflection of what we did the last time together, then it doesn't just become a series of individual sessions that we have, and okay, this person's going out the door and the next person's coming in. You begin to make those relational connections that say, I am paying attention to what you're saying, and I'm listening to you. And when you walk out the door, I don't just forget about you. Okay?
Mary, I think it would be valuable. I mean, I would like what Natalie said. I would like to do some of the role plays this evening so that I can see you modeling the skills. When I read about them, you know, that's one thing, but to see somebody with experience really model all of them in that non-judgmental listening cycle would be really helpful for me.
Sure, we can do that. We can do that. Let me just check and make sure that we're getting, let me go back to the list here and challenging skills, confrontation, ending a session, and replan. Okay, and the skills from week 3, which you missed in week 3 virtual classroom. Okay, let me grab my notes here. Adding notes to this class. Okay, how about who has a role play that they could do with me, or who has a situation or something that you could do with me that would give me an opportunity to, just got too much junk on my desk, to do some challenging or some confronting. Confronting is often one of the most difficult things for us to do, because when you think about confronting, what do you think?
I see confrontation as negative.
Okay, Wendy, yeah. And how about other people? Is that, for the most part, we've been taught to view confrontation as a negative thing. So I really like the Townsend term for this, the attuning confrontation. Because what it is, it's bringing someone face to face with truth, but we can do that with gentleness, and we can do it with compassion, and we can do it with grace. And when we are able to do that, it brings brings the person into the presence of whatever it is we're talking about, and it gives them space to safely consider it. You know, so a confrontation might be something like, we've been talking for several weeks now about your relationship with your son, and on the one hand, I hear you talking about what a good man he is, and what a responsible father he is, and how much he loves his family. And on the other hand, I hear you, talking about how neglected you feel by him, and somehow that just doesn't seem to add up to me, that the man you describe over here doesn't seem to match the man you describe over here. So I'm wondering where that discrepancy might lie. So that's a confrontation. That's an attuning confrontation. What does it do for the client?
Can draw their attention to the conflict, that their internal
Conflict.
discrepancy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then where might we go with this client, having kind of brought that discrepancy into the room? Where might we go with them?
You might go to their place of pain or shame.
Aha. Okay. So what if we did that, Debbie? What if we went to their place of pain and just sat with that with them for a little bit? Think about, what is it that this man's family is getting that mama feels like she's not? She sees something over here that she wants. She's not getting it the way she wants it. So if we enter into that place of pain, then again, you're going to hear me say creating space. We're creating space for her to explore that. And there's no telling where it could lead. It could lead to, is this a conversation that you could have with your son? If she's not been talking to him about it, we can move her forward, and a lot of that depends on her mentalization. How much is she living in reality? Is she able to take a gentle confrontation like that? Is she able to take it and process it, bring it into reality, and see that, okay, I've been looking at my son through these two mirrors, filters, and it's possible that it's not all about what he does. It might be about what I want.
And what if she can't?
Okay, then if you assess her mentalization and she can't go there, then you back off, and you try to enter in someplace else. I would go to I would see if she can identify some of the feelings. You've told me, you've talked about that he doesn't call you very often. Can you tell me what it's like for you when you don't hear from him for a while? or we could also go the route of, when your son does call, tell me about your conversations with them. And I could go down that avenue and see, are the conversations that she has with him satisfactory? Are they satisfying? Which my guess is they're not. And so how could those conversations change a little bit so that she gets more of what she wants when she does talk to him? Okay. It's not that there's a right way to do it. When we're opening up space to go a lot of different directions. And most of them, unless we just take off down a rabbit trail, if we're attuning and we're focusing on what the client is saying, most of those directions, it's like, I think of it as like being like a big ball of yarn, and we're going to pull one thread from the yarn, but it's all connected together. And so eventually we'll get to pulling the other threads. But right now, this one is the one we can catch hold of and that we can see. So we're going to pull on this one and see where it takes us. And then we'll add others as we go along. But that's really what attuning helps us to do, because if I'm always staying with the client, if I'm not thinking about, what I want to do here, or how much I know that this client needs to know that they don't know right now, and I wish I could tell them, or the advice I want to give them, or how I want them to fix this. If I'm not thinking about all of those things, but I'm focusing on the client and what they're saying, that pathway will be there. Yeah, go ahead, Debbie.
How do you recommend that we assess their mentalization? That's something new to me.
Okay. I don't think we do as much with mentalization in this as you will with advanced skills. You'll really, delve into that. But mentalization is a person's ability to be in reality, and probably one of the most obvious situations that I can think of would be somebody who's in an abusive relationship. And so we might be gently confronting them about, this seems scary to me. And if they're able to acknowledge, yeah, it gets really scary, then I know that they're pretty grounded in reality. They may not be ready to do anything about it yet, but they're at least aware that it's there. If the response is, well, he gets out of control sometimes, but he doesn't really mean it, and I know that he loves me, and if I didn't do certain things, he wouldn't get as mad as he gets. So I really need to learn to do things differently. Then I know that client is not living in reality.
Mary?
Yes.
Could I share something regarding what you just said?
You absolutely can.
To maybe give Debbie some clarity on that. What you just said, I was that person a couple of years ago. I was in an emotionally destructive marriage. And the irony of the whole thing is I have had a lot of training in domestic abuse. I'm a certified DV counselor, right? But for whatever reason, I could not recognize, nor would I label that in my own relationship. And so that was one issue, but then we had to go deeper and find out what was causing me not to want to label that in that relationship. So I totally understand the concept of assessing mentalization, because I knew what was going on, but I had certain fears that overrode my brain, is what happened. So what you said was very meaningful for me, because I lived through that, and my counselor helped me come to reality of what it really was.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. That's wonderful example, and thank you for sharing that. Would you be willing to go just a little bit farther and tell us how your counselor was able to help you raise your level of mentalization? What did she do, not do? What?
Well, I think she did it. I think she did it was very skilled at asking me questions that helped me to really see the truth. And you know, I think I can recall her even saying, what's stopping you from admitting that this is an abusive relationship?"
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm,
know, and so I think she did it through her questions. I think her questions, even though she didn't say necessarily, you know, on the one hand this, but on the other hand, I think she went about that through her questioning strategy.
mm-hmm,
And the questions that she asked me helped me dig deeper to figure out why wouldn't I just admit what, you know, what was going on? Why was I staying in denial about what it really was?
mm-hmm,
And you know, underlying it was she helped me get to the concept of it was a lot of fears,
mm-hmm,
you know. And then the other concept was which is, it's just so odd that I would have that training but not be able to recognize it in myself. And then the part of me thinking it was my responsibility to fix that, that
yeah,
if I looked better, if I talked better, if I then this wouldn't happen. And so it took me a lot of practice with her to understand that I wasn't causing this, I couldn't cure it, and I could not control it. That it wasn't just, it had nothing to do with me, but somebody else. But it took me a year and a half to really to go through that whole process. It took
mm-hmm,
a year and a half. Yeah.
yeah. And that's really where the patience for us comes in. We can often see something in a client's life or see a barrier or whatever for them, and we can kind of be chomping at the bit for them to become aware of it. But this is where that attuning and that relationship building comes into play, so that somebody who spent a year and a half with Carolyn and gave her time to come into her own reality.
Yeah,
Um,
she was good at that. She was you know, she was patient. And I knew that, and I think she did a great job of having a therapeutic relationship, because I knew she made me want to learn from her. You know, I wanted to understand myself in this. And
mhm.
she was patient, and I would get, you know, breakthroughs, and she'd get so excited and she would say, "Own it, own it."
Yeah, she celebrate this with you.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
but it was a process. It wasn't like I was totally like not getting it. I was getting it, but there were things that were holding me back, because I
Mhm.
once I admitted and labeled what it was, then I would be faced with some other decisions. And
That's
that,
exactly right.
you know, that's what it was. But she definitely was patient, and she was attuning, and she was not afraid to tell me the truth. Sometimes she just told me, well, that's abuse, you
Mhm.
know. She'd say, and then she would say things like, "I don't know any other woman who's worked harder on their relationship, Carolyn, yet nothing is changing. What do you
Mhm.
think that's about?"
Now,
You
see, that again that's a wonderful attuning confrontation. It's a wonderful example of an attuning confrontation. Um, you know, she couches it in something that you guys have talked about, how hard you've worked on the relationship and how important it's been to you to do that work. And so then she brings that discrepancy question in there and feeds it to you.
Yeah.
um,
Well, I'm pretty sure, you know, DV counseling in general makes you feel frustrated, because you know, why can't I get this person to see this? And and she never told me this, but I'm pretty sure she felt like, why can't you just like cut this? You know, she
mhm,
probably she probably felt that way, but she also helped me get to the point where I was strong enough, and I developed a lot of strength. You know, I grew stronger throughout the counseling, so it
mhm.
definitely worked, and it changed my life. So
Yeah, yeah. And we do get frustrated and we get impatient. What do we do with that frustration and that impatience?
Take it out on our spouses.
Well, that's one thing to do. Go home and kick the dog.
I was going to say kids, but I thought that sounded abusive. So
Maybe don't want to go there. Yeah. Yeah. You know what? So what do we do with it?
Aren't you like supposed to kind of like take notice of it and then like write it down, or maybe just like save it a time to like reflect on it at a later time?
All right. And that's that's a wonderful thing for us to do. What's a next step for us beyond that?
have our own counselors.
Have our own counselors, or this is one of those places where you know, John talks a lot about a life team. This is one of those places where the people who are on our life team become invaluable. Now, you know, some things we can't, because of confidentiality, we can't talk with other people about. And so that's where it's important to have those supervisory relationships or those peer relationships that, you know, I have 3 different organizations that I meet with at various times, that it's all counseling peers. And what we do is we get together to support one another, and we review cases with one another too when we need to, but mostly it's to support one another, you know. And these last however many months, a lot of it has been about how powerless we feel with everything that's our clients are losing jobs, people in their lives are dying, their kids are reacting to the changing situation and being away from their friends, and just all of these things that are happening, that we don't have any magic wand we can give them. It's sitting with them in the pain. And you know, you kind of get sick of hearing we're all in this together, because it's different. We're in it together, but it's different for everybody. But that feeling of powerlessness, or being able to go back to that group or call somebody from that professional group and say, you know, I met with my client who's in an abusive situation. I met with her again today, and sometimes it feels like she's not getting any closer to making some of the decisions that she needs to make. And then having that peer who will then do some challenging with me. And so, Mary, what's that about for you? And help get me in a place where I can go back in with my client and be present with my client where she is now, instead of where I want her to be. So great. Again, thank you, Carolyn, for sharing that. That was a perfect example. Yeah, Barb?
Yeah. So when you're talking about talking to other people, even though they're like counselors and that kind of stuff, is there any kind of ethics thing that you may be breaking by breaking confidentiality by talking?
That is not, well, for the first place, we don't mention names.
Right.
And in the second place, as long as it's a supervisory situation like that, then everybody in the group is bound by the same confidentiality ethics. Although each time we meet, the meeting starts out with the reminder of, you know, no, we don't need to be reminded of this, but what's said in here stays in here. Okay. And so yeah, and the same is true of talking to your supervisor at work. That's covered as part of protecting us. It's also part of protecting your client.
Right.
You know, in my years of experience, the people that I've seen get really in trouble the most are the people who try to lone wolf it. Well, I should be able to figure this out, or I'll figure this out on my own, or I don't need to talk to anybody about this, or I know what I'm supposed to do here, or I can find a resource that tells me what I should be doing here. That kind of arrogance, those are the people through the years that I have seen get in trouble.
Caleb, I'm in class.
All right,
And
other,
I have a question too.
yeah, go ahead with it.
And I think you mentioned, sometimes you get frustrated with the client, but I think sometimes that we also have these emotions around what a client has shared with us.
Mhm.
Like, that justice piece in us just comes out, but we have to, in that session, keep it in,
Mhm. Yeah, keep
under
it
control,
rolling.
because you
Yeah.
just want to, go and fight for them.
Mhm.
And then being able to, yeah, like you said, take that in, but what kind of are you doing in that session when you start feeling these emotions rising
Mhm.
in yourself?
I'm backing off and I'm focusing on the client and I'm hollering for the Holy Spirit. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I do to keep
Yeah.
me focused. That's one of those places where I'm asking God, give me your eyes and your ears and your heart, because this is not about me. This is about this client. Part of that, though, is also being able to discern when is it appropriate for me not to lose it, but when is it appropriate for me to say, for instance, um, to a client who has been repeatedly abused, sexually abused as a small child. When is it appropriate for me to reflect back to her? It breaks my heart and it angers me that someone treated you this way. Um, you know, the mom in me rises up and I would just like to beat them to a pulp. What I don't tell them is I would really like to take a knife to their private parts.
Mhm.
I save that for when I go back. And again, I have two other women counselors here that hear most of that stuff. We've all been together for a lot of years. And so I know that, even like 10, 11 o'clock at night, I know I can call Jama and say, okay, it was bad today. Here, sitting and hearing this, I just wanted to rip someone apart. And again, we talk through that. Now, here's the other thing. I can't tell you how many times I walk in the door, not right now because I'm already in the door, but how many times I walk in the door and just collapse onto my husband's shoulder and sob. He doesn't ask any questions. He just holds me and lets me cry it out. Because
Yeah,
some days are just that heavy. And
yeah,
some
and
stories
especially
are,
when
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially when the client can't, they're not able to feel those things yet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Those are going to be hard times. That's why it's so important. It is vital for us to have those support systems and to use them. And I didn't used to do that. I used to be one of those, I got to be tough and I should be strong enough to handle all of this. Um, and um, and I've just learned through the years that it's not. It's not about being tough and strong enough to handle it. If I'm going to be strong enough to handle it in the session, then I have to have some place where I take care of those feelings that rise up in me. And that can't be in the session. I have to be discerning enough um, to know when, I'll cry with my clients in session. I know there are a lot of people who say, it's wrong to cry. I don't think that's true. I will cry with my clients in session. What I am careful about is that I'm not in that place of sobbing. I want them to know that shedding the tears is okay. This actually just happened recently with one of my clients, that telehealth has been rough for her. She's had some severe abuse but she has hung in there, and she has continued to work. She and I worked together for about 6 months before we had to go to telehealth. And what I remember so well, one of the first things she told me was, I can't cry. I can't cry. And a couple of weeks ago, in one of our telehealth sessions, she started crying. The tears just started flowing. And so the tears started coming for me. And she started apologizing. I'm sorry. And I said, oh my, I am not sorry at all. I am honored to share these tears with you. And for her, it was such a big step forward. And to do that on video, to do that over telehealth, that was amazing. So responding appropriately to the client, a lot of that comes with discernment. Sometimes our clients need to see us be angry because we are modeling anger for them. But what we need to be able to really do is to put that in the context of that our anger is not directed at them. We want to be able to explain this is what's triggering this anger for me. This is the source of this anger. I hate it when people are treated like you have been treated. That and a lot of times what we're doing there, or what we're hoping to do there, is to give them permission to release their anger. And you're going to read a lot about containment and neutralization of feelings this week. I think one of the things that's so important about that is how we are able to receive a client's feelings. I need to be able to sit in the presence of a client who is furious, and not personalize it, not get defensive, but hear that anger and ask, okay, so what's it like to have somebody sit with you and hear that anger and not try to talk you out of it? Normalize it for them. Always, as long as they're not harming themselves or harming anybody else or destroying property. Those are the guidelines. They're not kind of the guidelines. Those are the guidelines. So, that comes back to that whole piece of attuning confrontation. Sometimes when we say to a client, I hear a lot of anger there. You're saying that with a smile on your face, but man, I'm hearing a lot of anger tied into that. Wonder if we could just sit with that for a minute. So anytime you do something like that, it's an attuning confrontation. You're very rarely are we flat out getting in a client's face and saying, you're not getting it. What's it going to take to make you understand this or get this or whatever? What's it going to take for you to change this? You've been coming in here now for 10 months, and what's it going to take for you to do something different than what you're doing now? And that's typically what we think of confrontation as being. It's when we look at it in the terms of counseling, that's not what we're doing at all. We are helping the person to come into the presence of truth. This is the truth part of that, but it has to also be accompanied by the grace. And then it's grace, truth, time. Then we get change. And that time element is nebulous. We don't know. For some people, it'll be the awareness comes pretty quickly. For other people, especially if there is deep, deep hurt, shame, guilt, some of those those heavier feelings that John talks about in his video this week, especially if those are there, it can take much longer for someone to begin exploring those. So, all right. Okay, I've talked about some things, given you examples of some things. Still got Debbie, your question, I think it was about the replan. What I do is not that far off from, the replan is, that's a good acronym to just kind of keep in mind when you're, particularly when you're starting out for what you're trying to accomplish. I'm doing relationship building. That's my first. I'm doing assessment and analysis, but I'm not doing a lot of assessing with and analyzing with the client. I'm doing that assessment and analysis as I'm doing the attuning and the reflecting feelings. And I'm using all of that to gauge or to gather information for assessment. And then I'm looking at, what I typically do is I want to always address whatever brought the client in, no matter what I think the issue is. I always want to be sure we're addressing what they said brought them into counseling. So that's going to be the first thing that we're going to really take a look at. And I'm going to let them know, I heard what you said you came in here to look at. I'm not going to just jump off and take them, oh, well, you got attachment, I'm hearing from what you're saying that there are some attachment issues here. Let's talk about attachment. Not going to do that. If they're coming in saying, I lose my temper with my daughter because she, when I ask her to do anything, she gives me a smart answer or whatever, then we're going to take some time and we're going to address that and what that looks like for her and what it feels like for her. Now, as that's happening, it's going to give me a lot of information about this person. And I'm going to kind of be gathering that in and cataloging it. And that's going to then direct some of my questions and some of my curiosity. That's the other thing is I want to be curious about my client. So I'm going to be asking a lot or saying a lot of I wonder, or help me understand this, or talk to me a little bit more about this. I'm going to be doing a lot of that curiosity, but it's always going to be centered around what the client is saying, not just because I want to gather data, and goal setting. I'm in a situation in private practice where we set goals, but I don't have to, because I don't take insurance. I don't have to be reporting, okay, this week we worked on this goal and this is what we did, and this is what we're going to do next. I don't really have to be doing behavioral goals as much. So in goal setting, what I'm trying to do is, again, to tie it into what would be helpful with this client moving forward. What would be helpful for this client moving forward? And that might be an activity that we would do together. I use a lot of art therapy in sessions with clients. And so we make we make collages, or they bring in music that's important to them, or songs that are meaningful to them. And we talk about those and we explore them. So we'll do some empty chair. I don't tend to do empty chair early on in counseling. Again, because I don't have a good sense of what's needed with the empty chair. Empty chair for me typically comes a little bit farther down once we've recognized, okay, this is a conversation that you need to be able to have. And once they feel a little safer having that conversation, again, we jump in and we do things like that. We do a lot of empty chair when we're doing process groups. But there is support there for somebody who is doing empty chair. It's different than sitting one-on-one in a room with a client. And there is already some good relationship built when we do empty chair, even in process groups. Let me tie this in. We talked a little bit about mentalization, but the other thing that you're assessing is your client's resilience. If I have a client that I know, if us talking about something, entering into some areas, that's going to pretty immediately cause that client to dissociate. Then I know that their resiliency in those areas is not strong. So I want to look for other areas where they're more resilient and reinforce those, and then just keep moving toward some of the more threatening, the deeper digs. And I'm always going to be willing to back off if it seems like what I'm reflecting back to the client is overwhelming to them, to the place where they just can't. Some of what we do is going to be overwhelming because we're digging into a lot of stuff. I had a session like that with a woman today that we've been working together for quite a while, and she was really digging deep today into some areas that we've not been able to go into before. When she and I first started working together, we couldn't have touched these areas with a 10-foot pole. But because of the work that she's done and the groundwork that she's laid, she's now at a place where we were able to spend the whole session today digging into these things. And at the end of it, she was so proud of herself and she felt so good. It was a hard session. It was, it wasn't a feel good session, but she was so proud of herself that she was able to enter into that. And to go there. But she and I have been working together for almost 3 years. The first whole year and into the second year, there is no way that we could touch any of this because it would just have, she would have fallen apart. And that's not fragilizing her. That's where she was. That was the level of her resiliency. She has increased her resiliency tenfold. She's not as susceptible to what others say to her or think about her. So she's done some real work in integration and separation. And that has increased her resilience to be able to then look at some of these other things. So we're looking at mentalization. How much is the client able to be present with reality? Just went right out of my head. Resilience. All I could think for a minute there was rationalization. We don't want to go there. But resilience. How flexible Are they? I always think about the scripture about the tree bending but not breaking. To me, that's resiliency. Is that, how much can my client bend with the storm without breaking? Debbie, does that help with how I kind of do the replan thing? That's kind of my thinking through all of that.
Yeah, I think that was Jackie's question.
Oh, Jackie. Okay, I'm sorry. I should have made a note. Jackie, did that answer your question about? And you will find your own way. Something like replan, an acronym, any of the acronyms, those are good starting places for you. And they kind of help keep us on track when we're trying to think about so many things, especially when we're first meeting with clients and doing this. You've got so much on your brain that you're thinking, I got to remember to do this, or I got to do this, or I should do this, or am I doing enough of this, or that's all in there. And so if you can have some helps like that, that that give you a little bit of focus while you're in that process, then as you become more comfortable with the process, as the skills become more ingrained in you, we want you to these skills to be so natural to you that you don't even think about doing them. You don't stop and think, okay, I'm going to do this now, or I should do this now. But meanwhile, right now, what it means is you do go back and you second guess yourself, and you watch those videos and you say, okay, could I have done this here? Should I have done this here? What was helpful about this? All of that is laying the groundwork to make these skills so integrated into you that you don't even think about them anymore. You're just doing them. And a benchmark for you is when you see yourself just doing these skills in all of your relationships, not just when you're in the counseling office, but you catch yourself using the skills anytime you're interacting with other people. And when you begin to catch yourself doing that, then you know that those skills are they're becoming a part of you and a part of the way that you think, and not just something that you do in response to something else.
I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Debbie.
As you're speaking about that, I am noticing the value and benefit of recording our sessions on Zoom, because I'm having a hard time thinking about all my skills and listening, attuning, reflecting, and still then get to the end of the session and I have very minimal notes. What kind of a note-taking system do you use?
As therapists, we're allowed to have 2 note-taking sessions or systems. One is kind of our progress notes, and that's I usually keep those to a bare minimum of, this is what we did in the session, this is when the next session's scheduled. If there's anything that we're supposed to focus on in the next session, I keep those kinds of notes, and I keep those electronically through a program called Theranest. Now, we are also allowed to have our journaling counseling notes. I keep those. I don't keep those electronically. I keep them in notebooks and with client files in them. And that's where I'm jotting notes as we are in the session. And I do notes a couple of different ways. I do a lot of what's called clustering, where as the client is talking, I'm just jotting down words that they're saying or phrases that they're saying. And then after a while, the client and I will take a look at that and we'll see. All right, are we seeing any themes here? Can we connect any of these up? And then those kinds of things, I make a copy for the client and it goes with them when they leave the office. It's not something, because that's work that we're doing for them. So I'll make a copy for them and send it with them when they leave the office. Even my notes that are my therapy notes, my counselor notes, I never make any criticism, or judgment of a client in those notes. I may make some speculation about, want to pursue attachment with this client, or want to pursue integration with this client. And so I may put some notes in there, or if a client says something in a session that I know it's not appropriate, or it's not good timing for us to dig deeper into that right then, but I want to be sure we circle back around to it at another point, then I will keep that in my counselor notes. Now, theoretically, and I'm going to say this theoretically, theoretically, those counseling notes can't be subpoenaed. Those are my private notes. My progress notes can be subpoenaed. Now, if a judge decides to issue a bench warrant, and that bench warrant says any and all counseling notes, then my first call is going to be to my attorney, who is going to go to court and argue for me that that it's not in the client's best interest for my counseling notes to be entered, that they have an accurate picture of what we've been doing in therapy through the progress notes. And if the judge still, this is in 30 years, this has only happened to me one time, where when my attorney went to court and explained the difference and said, these are her notes to keep. I've only had one time when a judge has overridden that and insisted that my original notes be turned over to the court. And I never got the originals back. They gave me a copy of them, but the court kept the originals. But that's only happened once in 30 years. And I don't know all of what was happening and what was going on there, but I suspect that maybe the judge and the doctor who was being sued had a little collegial relationship or something going. At least that's what my attorney thought at the time, but that's the only time that's happened. Our notes are supposed to be protected notes, but again, you really want to be careful because in some states, a client can ask to see your notes, and they have the right to do that. So I'm really careful that I never put anything in my private notes that I would not be okay discussing with the client.
Can I ask how many times in 30 years you've been subpoenaed for at all?
Twice.
Okay, so it doesn't happen to them. I was just trying to get how prepared do we need to be for
that. My notes have been subpoenaed. Now I've been subpoenaed to testify. Usually my attorney can get me out of that. There have only been a couple of times that because part of what is stated in my client information is that I will not answer a subpoena in a custody case if it arises, or a divorce case, or a criminal case. That, I forget how my attorney worded all of this for us. But the gist is that up front, because I've had friends that this has happened to, that they've done marriage counseling with a couple. The couple has decided to pursue divorce, and then one or the other has wanted to come back and subpoena counseling notes for the divorce case or for custody. And so my consent to treat for clients covers that and says that I will not release my notes in an instance like that. Now, if they come in to discuss custody, if we're doing some mediation around custody, then that's a different story. Those notes do become open to being called into court, and both times that I've actually had to go and appear in court were related to child custody cases. So but again, I'm gonna preface that by saying, keep your nose clean. You know, I don't do anything shady. I don't. I watch and make sure my P's and Q's are that everything is in line with clients coming in. You know, I don't. If I start seeing one spouse and then they decide they want to have marriage therapy, then I don't do the marriage therapy. Or if they want to, I have one couple or one client that just repeatedly says, my husband would like to come see you. He likes the work we're doing together and he'd really like to come work with you. My answer is always and will always be no. You know, it not happening. Because I want to protect myself and I want to protect my ability to be able to continue to help people. And that's a part of it. Okay. All right. Anybody got a scenario that we can role play here as we're kind of coming toward the end of our time? Or here's the other thing that we could do. If anybody is willing to get with me one-on-one and do a role play, well, we can talk it through and we will record it so that then everybody else can see it. That's another option if anybody would be willing to do that. We'll set up a time to do that.
I would be willing to do that with you.
Okay. All right, Carolyn, let's get together and get a time when we could meet for an hour or so. And you and I will do a role play. We'll use, we might do a couple of role plays. We'll get as many of the skills in as we can and identify those. Okay? And if anybody else wants to do one, I'll do more than one with people. And then we'll post those for you all to be able to see. Okay? Let's don't do it tomorrow because tomorrow I am determined I am going to get those teaching videos finished up and posted. That's my agenda for tomorrow. And Natalie, a part of that is I've been working on those skills in week 3. I have a program that's called Doodly that kind of does an animated whiteboard thing. And I've been working on putting those into a Doodly program. And I will make that a priority to get that finished up tomorrow so you have those to see. Okay? Anything else that you need me to be working on or thoughts, questions?
Mary, I have a question. I know you mentioned during our first class that there is an optional class next week for week 6. Is that
yes, and I will still do that as long as I'm physically able. I will still do that. I'm planning on it. I reduced my client load today. I cut my day off a little bit early so I could do some resting time this afternoon and hopefully be more alert tonight and and able to engage. So, and I'll
Okay.
do that same thing next week. I'll just make allowances to be able to be up later and have this time with you guys, because I've missed seeing you. Emailing is not the same. Oh. Real quick, I know we've got to stop. We only have a few minutes, but we didn't get a chance to process either John's virtual classroom last week and the time with Dr. Amen. How'd you all think about that? About the borderline, talking about the borderlines and then Dr. Amen's. Wow, he just does amazing things, I think. So any thoughts about that? Anybody read any of Dr. Amen's books? He has written some really good books.
No, but I've used, I came across him a couple times before that night, and I also heard he has a clinic near here in Seattle, but
yeah,
I have been using his Happy Saffron supplement, and it's amazing.
All right, very
Yeah.
good, very good.
Can I ask like a weird question about it? Just because I decided to look him up, there's a lot of controversy around him.
Oh, there
and I kind of
is.
just wanted your opinion on that, just
Mhm.
because I'm interested to see, like, it almost seemed, I mean, something to look into and to take as well as what he's saying, and also to look at the other side as well. What you think about that?
Let me do the positives first, particularly in the community, in the mental health community. The work that he has done with brain imagery and the data that he has compiled, it's been invaluable, and will continue to be invaluable. Him continuing to collect data. What we know about the brain, it baffles me as it does him. I can't get brain imaging done here in Indianapolis for any of my clients. The clients that have needed to do brain imaging, we've had to send them out to his clinic. And that's an expensive process. Now I'm talking with a neurologist here in town who seems a little more up on the brain and mental health, about the possibility of him beginning to do some brain imaging here, because I've had a number of clients that it would really have been helpful to send them for some brain imaging. So from that standpoint, absolutely solid. Where a lot of the controversy has started coming in for him is because of his use of supplements and his views on nutrition and dietary issues. Now, I don't know, nothing has been proved and nothing has been disproved. Some people really benefit by with using some of the supplements. Others, it does nothing for them at all. But that's where a lot of the controversy has come around, particularly when he started selling supplements out of his own office. That did some damage to his credibility in the community. Now, to me, that doesn't in any way negate the scientific data that he's been able to accumulate and the information that he can demonstrate, that really has nothing to do with diet or supplements or that kind of thing, has to do with the human brain and how it functions, how it works. But that's a good question, Barbara. It's always good to check things out.
And I would say on that point though too, even with the brain imaging, there's so many psychologists and neurologists that are slamming him for that too. So from your perspective, if it's very valuable, why would they be complaining that it's unnecessary or unproven if so many psychologists or neurologists are saying that it is good in proving something?
Yeah, it's not necessarily that it's unproven, but I am going to sound so cynical here, but this is the reality of the world we live in. A lot of it is money. It's so expensive to do brain imaging. And you know, not much has been done to get the cost of that down. And we're not talking like an MRI that they did on me last Friday. We're not talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about brain mapping, complex brain imagery. But you know, when I can look at scans, brain scans, and see the difference between someone who has been addicted to a substance and has gone into recovery, and a year later, I can look at those same brain scans and see that the brain has regenerated itself. You know, when I can look at that and see it, to me, that's important. You know, we've known all along that the brain, with some substances, that the brain could do a certain amount of coping, but we didn't know that it was regenerating. It was repairing. It was healing. To be able to see that and to have that documented, you know, to me, that's just invaluable. But again, it's so expensive, you know, and a lot of the research money, a lot of the diagnostic money goes into things like cancer, which is itself important. But being able to do these scans has, okay, this is editorializing. This is gospel according to Mary. I think what will eventually make the difference is the athletes and the traumatic brain injuries. I think that's what eventually is going to turn the spotlight on this enough that it will become more available, you know, maybe not acceptable. But already the athletic world is beginning to use brain scanning to validate traumatic brain injury, early onset dementia. Researchers in Australia have done some amazing things researching Alzheimer's and dementia. Working, and a lot of the work that they've done has been with regard to brain scans. You know, because up to this point, or up until just recent years, we weren't able to officially diagnose Alzheimer's until after someone died. You know, people used the term, but you could not give an official diagnosis of Alzheimer's to someone until after they died, because only then could you examine the plaque in the brain. You know, now some of the brain imaging is making it possible to scan that plaque or to examine that plaque while the person is still alive. And that's led to a lot of the research and development of some of the medications, the drugs that we have now that's being used to treat early onset dementia. So, aren't you sorry you asked that question?
That was helpful.
Good. Good. Anybody else questions before we send you all off to bed? Except you, you West Coast people, you may not be ready for bed yet.
Oh, I do have a quick question, and that is for those of us who waited to do our video that was due, and you said we could wait. When is that due?
If you can get them done by Friday, that would be wonderful. Um, you have another video that you have to do this week, so so you're going to kind of be doubling up. So let me say, as long as you have them both in by Sunday night, you'll be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And if you have questions about that video, please feel free to contact me. I will get back to you as quickly as I can. If we need to role play some stuff together, we can do that. I want to be, in spite of the last couple of weeks, I want to be as available to you as I can. All right. Thank you all for being here tonight. And okay, along those deadline things, did you all get the message from me that your post about Dr. Townsend's virtual classroom? That as long as you have that in by tomorrow night, you'll be okay with that. We actually got the recording a little earlier this time. A lot of times it's Friday or Saturday before we get the recording. So I always give you extra time for that assignment. I'm just not comfortable at all with you getting something one day and it being due the next. So as long as you get that in by Tuesday night, you'll be okay. All right. Any other questions? Wonderful to see you all. And hopefully we'll hang out again next Monday night. Same time, same bat station. Okay? Night, y'all.
Thank you, Mary.
Uh-huh.